Another memory that I had was hearing that clip-clop of the horse's feet in the morning as J.J. Joubert came along with his milk wagon and delivered, and then you heard the rattling of glass bottles in that metal cage as he came up the stairs and delivered the milk right to your front door. Not only was that a great service, but during the winter, there was a special treat. Yes, you remembered it, Sneak, because the cap would lift from the frost, and there would be a 2-inch crown of thick cream on the top of those milk bottles. And that was a treat that you only got thanks to our Canadian and Montreal winters. And then the other thought was of the corner store, the corner grocery store, with barrels of herring, barrels of sour pickles, barrels of sauerkraut. And I remember Maxie the grocer putting his hand in that barrel right up to his shoulder and pulling out a herring. And he usually had to do it more than once because there was a very discriminating customer who would say, no, a little fatter, please. So he would drop the first one in and then go fishing on the bottom again until he found the herring that she really liked. And who would ever forget the dairy store? The dairy store with the mountains of butter, and another one of cottage cheese, and another one of cream cheese, and the salesperson would take that big cleaver, and I used to love watching it because so smooth. It would just sort of slip into that mound. And if you asked for a half a pound, they were never off by more than a few pennies. I couldn't understand how they did that. That whole community that I lived in was made up of mostly immigrant families. Families who escaped persecution and poverty in Europe, and they came here hoping to provide better opportunity for their children. And when they crossed the ocean, they didn't come with just their feather quilt. They came with their sets of values, their beliefs, and their customs. And I remember my father wanting so much to impart those values on the kids in our family and on me. And so I would hear two things very frequently. No matter what you do in life, Rosalyn, be a mensch. A mensch meant, in translation, a person. But in the meaning in the Jewish tradition, a mensch meant be a decent person, plus, 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 plus. And then he'd often say to me, if you want to be a somebody, do your homework. And I would have to prove to him that I was doing it. I remember that my childhood home with very fond memories. I remember Saturday afternoons, on a cold, wintry Saturday afternoon, that dining room table was surrounded by family, by friends, and my mother's wonderful baking. Chocolate cake, babkas, butterscotch swirls, and my very favorite, those Turkish delight rolls. And I think that is where I first heard my gentle, timid, funny Auntie Faye's story about her trip to buy bananas. And she remembered that her mother had taken a coin and slapped it onto the palm of her hand, curled the fingers over it, and said, Faye, go to Mr. Dave and buy some bananas for me. And Faye said she held that fist clenched so that she wouldn't lose that money. And she went to Dave's fruit store. And when she walked into the fruit store, there was another woman there who was buying tomatoes. And that woman would have a conversation with every single tomato she picked up. You're too soft, you're too hard, you're too ripe, you're too green. And Dave would stand behind the counter with his carrot red hair and his quick temper and wait for her to finish as he watched her poke every single tomato on time. And Faye said, you know, I went up to pay for my bananas. And Dave looked at me, and the woman in front of me was the lady with a bag in her hand, and she was the lady who was picking tomatoes. And he grabbed the bag out of her hand, and he said, you lady, out of my store. You can't buy tomatoes in my store. You see that nice little girl? You see the nice little girl who's so polite and quiet? She's going to get the tomatoes. And Faye said, he put his hand out for money, and she unclenched her hand. And he took the coin off her hand. And she went home with a bag of tomatoes. No, she had no bananas. The stories that I heard in my home, the stories about being a mensch, the stories of all those other stories,